it's such a pleasure to be here today. And I know we've had a long day, and I hope everyone has their favorite beverage of choice. I know it's kind of hard in the uncertain times that we're in right now, like what beverage should I have? I go before like 4 o'clock, it's coffee. And then after 4 o'clock, well, who knows after that. So I realized I've been tuning in and out today, and I realized that we've kind of touched on this time that we're in right now, but we haven't spoken about it in any real way. And it's kind of an extraordinary time that we're in. And I think it's going to change everything about emotion AI and emotionally intelligent design and emotion tech. Now, we know we're getting kind of new inklings of emotion. We have anxiety about all different kinds of things and it's followed different trajectories, right? We've from washing our hands to how much distance do we have to what we wear on our faces to the low level anxiety of people we know getting sick. We have panic reactions, like, of course, there's always a German word for everything, hamster cough, which I'm probably saying wrong, but the idea of hoarding and buying, which hamsters, visualize really well. We might be experiencing right now a little bit of Zoom gloom, and it's been analyzed extensively. Well, partially it's because we're seeing ourselves. Partially it's because we see each other, but we don't have this 3D sense of our presence, because it brings this longing for being actually together. And so far, people have attempted to do different takes on it. I think Seth, when he does editing after the sessions, he's going to go for a look like this. So we'll kind of like, amp it up a little bit. And there's new emotions, like the nostalgia for a time that was only just a month or two ago. I know I feel it all the time. I live outside of New York City, but I spend a lot of time in New York City, and the little things I miss all the time. And those folks who are studying climate have this notion of anticipatory grief, or they call it solastalgia, where we grieve for something that hasn't yet happened. We're anticipating our grief for it. Now, on the climate front, yeah, maybe things are looking a little bit up as we kind of joke around and try to cope with these emotional moments that we're having and the intensity, and other issues that have long been emotional issues for us, like loneliness, which the World Economic Foundation has described as one of the top mental health issues of our time, has been extensively explored in this time. And of course, we find ways through reaction gifs and memes and social media sharing to band together against the boredom, against the anxiety, to kind of cope with these moments. And we've seen an extraordinary coming together, appreciating the carers, the healthcare workers, and just bringing us together, even though we're all alone in our various spaces. And of course, we see new behaviors. Now, Obama started the elbow bump back, I think, in 2012, and it probably has a history before that. And Theresa May might, want to give up the handshake part of her curtsy right now, but we're seeing otherwise. I'm going to go for the Vogue, I think, maybe, or possibly pirouettes. I've got to practice that one. But we're developing new ways of greeting each other, and we don't know how it's going to cash out. Well, this is not just idle conversation or a way to kind of bring us all together for this final session, but this is really core to what I do, because I think that what is happening in our world now and in the past few years, especially intensely, is that technology and our lives that are mediated through technology is changing our outer world for sure, but it's also changing our inner life. And so what I do, it's always kind of hard to describe. You know, I don't think I'll ever get to this point where I can easily describe what I do, but I think it's, I'm a designer and I'm a researcher. And what I do is, one thing is bring people together to creatively explore these new feelings. So when I say feeling society, I've brought people together to explore anger in Austin and Schadenfreude salons in Hamburg. And now I'm exploring that online with small groups of people who are, some are experts and some are just people experiencing this themselves. I do creative research where I bring people together in different ways. So we've heard a lot about surveys, we've heard a lot about polling, and certainly we can do research with sentiment analysis and emotion AI. What I try to do is get people involved in making things and creative activities. And that's a big part of the other work I do, which is speculative design, and figuring out how can we create a tangible vision of our future to kind of feel our way into it. And so it looks like a lot of workshopping and design and coming together in various ways to think about stuff. And so today, what I want to do though is jump into the future, even a little beyond 5 years. So that was a great introduction. But first, I want to go back to the past a little bit, just to say where we were, that long ago past of January 2020, which I had been calling the age of big emotion. Now we'll refer to it as the before times, before we experienced this extraordinary event. So we know we've been hearing about, in the before times, the huge market for artificial emotional intelligence and how it's going to hit every industry, every place we have emotions, there it will be. And we saw various experiments over the past 5 years. That's how I got interested in it, is thinking about emotion and technology and looking at all of these new experiments, some of them kind of silly, right? Like we have the happiness blanket of British Airways. I don't know if you remember this one, but the blanket has sensors to basically detect upset or not upset and calm. We had silly projects like Caliburger, Loyalty by Face, where you pay with a smile. Of course, that is kind of ridiculous and also a little bit sinister. We have seen customer care applications that are real customer care applications that help the agents understand the emotional tenor of the call and maybe make adjustments to the way they're approaching it. We've seen a lot of developments in automotive, and we've talked about that today. There have been several sessions looking at how emotions in our car, it's a worthwhile exploration, right? Because we're in this private little pod where we are having our feelings a lot of times, right? Some of our feelings are directed towards other drivers, like road rage, which is a major cause of accidents. Some of these are directed inward. And so there's a lot of sadness that causes accidents in your car too. And I think now, in this time, cars might even become more significant as a space where people can be alone if they're sheltering in place with larger families. So there's quite a disparity of how we're sheltering in place. Some people are alone all the time and craving that connection. Others have a little too much togetherness. So it creates that space. And of course, we've seen a lot of this grow out of mental health and helping people to develop emotional skills. So a lot of early work done for children on the autism spectrum. This is an example of brain power glasses. There have been biofeedback games like Nevermind, so that if you have your headset on and your wristband on and you keep yourself calm, that you can manage the game more appropriately, or you can get stressed out and have a more exciting game. There have been other ways of trying to measure mood with wearables, to attach objects to us to change our mood, like the Think, this little plastic potato chip. I actually tried this one out, and it didn't change my mood. It gave me a really bad headache, but it's gone away now. So that was quite some time ago, so I'm okay. And as designers, we have been in the role of making this new technology feel friendly. So Apple, who's purchased Emoticon and combined that with their Face ID, what do immediately we try to do? Well, we try to make it cute and friendly and not scary and not dystopian. Or we have the dearly departed Jibo, who has a really cute little personality.
I'm Jibo. I don't think we've met. I'd offer to shake your hand, but, well, I have no hands.
Yeah, on the humor kind of low there. But, you know, designers tried that. And, you know, there were some problems with it too, right? It doesn't work very well. So my students right now are actually in the midst of using Microsoft Video Indexer to go through their video interviews. They did ethnographies and deep in-depth interviews. And some of them were surprised and they said, you know, I'm not getting a lot of emotion out of this. And when I do, it's kind of off. And I kind of think of it as a toddler, right? That our technologies right now have very limited models, but also kind of limited success. So when they see a sentence like this, you know, they're not really getting everything about the tone and they're missing a lot of context. So that's a problem. Another problem, of course, is some of the ethics that we've talked about a lot today. So that we see overstepping of boundaries with just even a little bit of emotion information. It's unclear how much or what exactly Facebook was indexing on here, but certainly they overstepped a boundary by claiming that they could advertise to teens who were depressed. And then we fear for our privacy and the power of these big companies having all of this data and what they're going to do with it and who they're going to partner with and for what purposes, so much so that there's a whole kind of cottage industry in emotion hiding clothing and facial recognition hiding makeup and hair that we became so paranoid about it. And of course, then probably the other big objection, and we've heard that a lot today, is that the models are off. So there was a lot of discussion in late 2019 and early 2010 about how facial recognition has not only issues with bias and the context that it's used in, but also that it doesn't really demonstrate your feelings, right? Because I can be smiling, but like dying inside, or I can be having a really fake smile and it still might be detected as not a genuine kind of a Duchenne smile, right? And this is an argument that's been going on for a long time in emotion studies, whether you look at psychology or neuroscience or history of emotion or all the fields. There's kind of an evolutionary model, which our technology is based on now, which says, yeah, there are some universals that are, when we have these signals that are imperfect, but kind of get to the point. And then we have kind of a social constructivist model that says, no, you know, that has very little relevance here. So it's kind of a nature nurture thing. And I don't know if we'll ever really sort it out. So this is where we were at just a few months ago. We said, okay, we're making progress. We're getting to systems that evoke emotion, that adjust system response, that teach emotional skills that are much needed, and that maybe even help us form closer relationships, maybe with each other and maybe with the technology itself, for better or worse. And we saw a flourishing of companies that are in the space and many more that I haven't even, this list keeps growing every day, every time I share it. Then came late February, early March, and we've got a hard reset on everything. Everything that felt true and important before then feels a little bit inauthentic now. So what are we doing with all this emotion technology now, right here in this moment? Well, there's a lot of public sentiment analysis trying to use technology to understand the sentiment. This is from a leaked Brandwatch report given to FEMA and the Trump administration to help them understand the mood of the nation. Spoiler alert, it's not good. Cognovi Labs has done kind of a similar thing where they've looked at what they call a panic score for each area the world, and also kind of overall, you can see in the corner there the emotions that are going on right now and some of the words that are coming up in their analysis. Expert System published this report. This screen grab is from about a week and a half ago, so it kind of flips between fear, anxiety, sadness as sort of the top emotion I've noticed as I've been checking in on it every day and giving us kind of a temperature read, if you will. Maybe pun intended, I'm not sure. Emojipedia has actually been tracking emojis correlated with coronavirus and COVID-19. And Realize has noticed that smiles among consumers are down. So we're using this technology right now to kind of get a read on where the public is, and in a way to get a sense of what we can do from here. Where do we head next? There's been a surge in use of not only virtual face-to-face therapy, but also chatbot therapy. So you've got Wobot that doesn't have any emotion recognition in it. However, there are other similar kinds of mood-related tools or chatbots that do have some level of emotion recognition. So it's not too hard to imagine that shift happening very soon even in this next year or through 2021, for instance. And there are combinations where, like Limbic, where it's a mood tracker that tracks mood from your voice and from what you put in, but also shares that with your therapist. So kind of joins up those two big trends that we're seeing right now. Now, you're thinking to yourself, well, what I really need is some help with Zoom, because that is what's messing me up now, and I'm spending too much time and I'm not having empathetic communication with people. And there's really not that much. There's going to be a scramble in the next couple of years, but in this time that we're in now, there's not much to help us. There's Crystal Knows, which is a plugin that kind of works like your Gmail suggestions, giving you some ideas of how to be more sensitive in your texts and emails based on an analysis of emotion and other words in that person's communications with you. And there have been a lot of dating apps. None of them so far has an emotion AI component, but they have a lot of basis for that, because the move is away from static photos and swipes to video chats and remote dating, which primes it for that kind of interaction. And then with customer service and with assistance for COVID-19 in a health context, we've seen a lot of movement. So you see this Amelia assistant who does have some level of emotional intelligence. You have the Tommy bot in the Italian hospitals also has some level of emotional intelligence. And then, Boston Dynamics always has to throw a spot in the mix somehow. This is like, I don't know, it's like a weird messed up centaur or something like that. Kind of a weird approach to telepresence. However, I feel like it's adjacent to what we're talking about. And then in this current time that we're in right now, we're seeing solutions like this, like System Sense, which you could easily see being set up in, say, an airport situation or upon entering a big building in a large city, that it identified all these signals. And a lot of these signals, while Symptom Sense doesn't interpret emotion data yet, it's collecting a lot of signals here that could be used for that, like heart rate or oxygen level or things like that. So what we're seeing right now, I think, is kind of some of our ways of detecting emotion, like face and touch, may be fading into the background for a while. And we may be exploring other methods like voice and text, even temperature through your forehead. We'll look at something around that in a minute. Heartbeat, together with self-report and location. And, you know, some of that has to do with not wanting to touch anything. Like I look at that Tommy bot in the Italian hospital, I'm like, a touch screen, probably not a great idea. This is the work of Dominic Wilcox, the speculative designer. And he actually designed this about 5 years ago already now, thinking about our reluctance to touch things that are germy and what possible solutions could there be, and looking back in history at plague doctors. But, you know, still our emotional palette is pretty small. We're still modeling all of our technology on this one way of understanding emotion. And if we look at a model of emotional intelligence, so there's quite a few different models. There's Daniel Goleman's model, which is kind of a blend of some previous models. There's the Ruler model of the Yale School of Emotional Intelligence. So what I've done is kind of blended them a little bit here, and it's imperfect, but you can see where we're at right now is just helping get some level of awareness about emotion, whether in a social context or personal context. So, okay, that's 2020. Now let's jump ahead a couple years to 2022. The new emotionalism. Guess what? We maybe thought we were in the age of big emotion, kind of like big data before. Here, people are now becoming more comfortable, more attuned to their own emotions. And we'll probably start seeing some emotion tech blend with some other traditions. So where do we look for this? I always look for this in a few different places for directions for the future. Patents, I look at Kickstarter and new startup ideas, and I look to the past sometimes, and I look to speculative design. So here, if we look to the past and we look at manner of dress in the 19th century, those big skirts were great for social distancing, and that's exactly one of the purposes of them. But how could we have physical distance and still have emotional presence? Well, this is a great space for emotion AI to get into. And guess what? IBM already started that. There just wasn't enough space for that. And, you know, we don't all have thousands of dollars to spend on cognitive clothing at that point. So there'll have to be some kind of breaking point there. If we look at patents and what Amazon has patented with Alexa, not only is there emotional voice detection, but also detecting signs of illness. And of course, there's been a lot of research on heart disease and voice and how those two come together. And Amazon is patenting away on these issues and partnering with PillPack. And so we're sure to see an emotionally intelligent Alexa who at least can be beyond a regular assistant to giving us some kind of health assistance. Perhaps if we look at Google's patents, there's a Google search patent based on mood. Here, the example is a restaurant that isn't liked, but wow, wouldn't it be good if this was used for misinformation in some way, to use this kind of emotional cue to understand how news that isn't, that is deeply felt, but maybe not true, is spread, and how people react to news and what impact that has on the spread of it. So we can look to speculative design. This is a colleague of mine, Simone Redabengo. He designed this in 2015 after living in Shanghai and becoming accustomed to seeing masks everywhere and not being able to interpret facial expression. Maybe not, you know, the best use of interpretation, or a little clumsy. The speculative designs do look that way, but it gets us thinking about, well, what do we want to do, and how would we interpret each other's emotions if we're wearing masks? And this is especially important, I guess, for emotion detection, right? Because if we're wearing masks, then that's a signal that's lost to us. Now, 2022, if we look at Zoom alternatives, will probably appear. This one by Argo Design shows kind of a 3D vision. They didn't include any emotional dimensions to it, but you could easily imagine combining that with some of the emotion detection that is a little controversial, but that you would see in office spaces, or that Nestor has been trying out in schools to understand engagement, intensity of emotion, attention, and bring all of those aspects together for a better experience. Of course, we could also draw on real life spaces. I'm obsessed with places we go to have emotions. So movie theaters, I think, are especially striking. If you saw The Quiet Place in a movie theater back a couple years ago, an extraordinary experience. I've taken my students to the break room end of semester to go just smash a bunch of stuff. Those, of course, came into being around 2016. Wonder why. But there's all these places where we can go to have feelings. And this might also be a non-tech merger with Zoom that could help us out. And then if we look at empathetic communication within Zoom itself, we can turn to some of the work of speculative designers like Lauren McCarthy to help us imagine what that might look like. So she developed this actually quite some time ago, imagining what if Google Hangouts had an emotional component to it that you could look at, kind of based on the sentiment analysis that was available at the time a few years ago. So let's take a quick peek at this one together.
Hi Claire, how's school treating you?
I'm doing okay right now. I'm just kind of annoyed because there's this girl named Stacy in my yoga class who just got pregnant and she won't stop talking about it. And I just feel like she's being really...
Technology has made us more connected than ever. Shouldn't it help us get more from each other?
She just won't stop talking about her pregnancy and what yoga moves that the whole class should not do because she...
Us Plus gives suggestions based on speech analysis and facial expressions.
It's just everything is... how are you doing, Mom?
Well, actually, things haven't been all that great. I wasn't sure whether to tell you this, but
More honesty, more
I
balance.
feel like we're barely communicating and sometimes it's just not the same. I try to talk to you and you don't respond, and I can't even...
Oh, that's cold.
I love you.
Okay, so you get the idea there. And I think that we're gonna see in 2022 that haptics actually get a place. So the hug shirt's been around for a while in many different iterations. And the idea is that you have a hug shirt and your loved one has a hug shirt. And if you hug, that you feel the hug virtually. And I think right now what we're going through is kind of this oxytocin starvation, this lack of touch that a lot of people are suffering from right now. And this is going to be a big area potentially of innovation. So we've also seen this idea around for quite some time. Kissinger, this came out of the University of Singapore a while back and then was reimagined for mobile phones. So you get the idea, not entirely sanitary, according to my teenage daughter, who said ew when she saw this, but you put your lips on one, put your lips on the other, and transfer. And so you can imagine this kind of emotional connection with haptics. What would a talk be without a little BDSM? I know you didn't know you were getting in for this, but there's another speculative project where you're remote from your partner and you're missing that intimacy, and you know, maybe you're into whatever you're into. The idea here is that the partner can control how much the choking happens, because some people are into erotic asphyxiation. So, and of course there's a pull cord, and you would have some setting to, like a safety setting to pull back on as well there. We're seeing lots of people getting pets. In fact, I think I heard that some cities ran out of pets to adopt because we're looking for that closeness. And so I think all of these experiments that have been going on in trying to understand our pets and view our pets on video when we're away from home might get into this emotional level. So here we have a mood collar, inupathy for this poor guy who doesn't have a tail and can't communicate their emotions with us. And of course, this goes back to, you know, Darwin's evaluation of human and animal expression, that there are ways that animals express emotion too, and why should they not be in the mix? And there's been tons of interesting research around pain expressions in sheep and facial expressions in mice. So why not our pets? For sure, we'll probably see emotion AI move into this space for our companion bots in various ways. So Paro doesn't necessarily have that awareness or that recognition of emotion, but that may be something that's even more desirable now that we've gone through this. And of course, there'll be devices to help us adapt and change our mood that are a little more sophisticated than the Think that I tried a while back. So we're not to the point where we're dialing up custom emotions. And, you know, certainly this has its roots in other things. Like, for instance, you know, we definitely change our mood in lots of different ways, whether it's drugs or being around certain people. So this is not an unfamiliar idea. And I think we'll see a lot more with combining DNA and biometrics and looking at emotion in that kind of way. So there's lots of innovation in the space of food and mood. I know I'm personally doing some work in that space right now, and that feels like something that, especially now in this time where resources are scarce and people are thinking more about being healthy and getting healthy, that this will be an area where emotion AI collides to make a strong trend. So we're seeing now 2022, maybe face and touch will still be not as popular as they are, but we'll be adding in haptics and gaze and perhaps breath to help us understand emotion. And if you look at this in the context of emotional intelligence and development, well, we're seeing a lot more movement, and a lot of the things that started out as just awareness becoming even stronger. So, okay, let's go to 2025, era of emerging emotional intelligence. Where is this all going? My vision is kind of positive for this. I'm certain there are dystopians amongst us that would argue with this, and I welcome that in the comments. But I think what we're seeing is more, as we have this growing awareness, more customization of how we communicate emotionally with each other. I love this project called Et Moi. For the sake of time, we won't watch the video, but what it is custom chocolates that are designed to capture your emotion through voice. And then, this is a speculative project, by the way, but somebody should actually make this, I think. You capture your emotions by voice, and they're made into chocolate. And it shows an intelligence about design principles too, because in the design world, we really don't have a ton of knowledge at this moment about how to design for emotion. It's very rudimentary. It's like, let's put in a little surprise and delight. Let's do a happy color, but there's not much thinking beyond that.
Et Moi is the first gift that lets you show the way you feel towards someone else through chocolate.
So, but this one actually does some thinking on that level too, like looking at some of the things we know about designing for emotion, like the Booba Kiki effect, where something that's kind of has soft edges and is more rounded is more associated with a positive emotion and that kind of shape. That's the Booba right there, and the Kiki is the pointy one, which sharper, more acidic, more kind of bringing together that metaphorical connection as well. This is a project right now. Breathing AI is really focused on a remote vital signs monitoring app, and it just pivoted to that, the folks on that team. But it started out, and probably will go back to at some point, an adaptive design process so that it can detect your heart rate through your forehead of your webcam, and then from there along with some input from you, determine what kind of look is going to bring you calm or peace or happiness. I sincerely hope that the Comic Sans font will not bring you peace or happiness. If it does, well, we're going to have a talk about that one. We may see adaptive design like this too, where it's responsive to our expression, like this experiment with typeface, where you can see as she changes her facial expression, the design adapts to that emotion. And you know, I can go on, I want to be mindful of our time here and wrap up, but there are experiments with changing the emotional settings of our assistants. So this is Superflux's idea of how you might have an avatar.
Make a call to Lightspark. For this call, use my identity and demand our energy bill refund.
Of course. Please provide your authorization phrase to make the call.
You can off.
Thank you.
Here you see, you can
Hello.
make adjustments to
Welcome to
mood and
Lightspark.
personality. And as the call goes on, she sets the mood to be more and more intense and angry. Lovatics and National University of Singapore uses hormones so that oxytocin that we're missing, that we're starved for right now, is emitted by this device, which looks like a little mop head right now, but could be developed in all kinds of different ways. And then of course, back to cars, because we've talked about it a lot and there's been a lot of innovation there. What if we could develop a relationship gradually? So Toyota imagines in their iConcept car, a car that would grow with you and get to know your core affect, your emotional register as you grow and age with the car. And so here, the man driving the car got the car at age 16, went through having a small daughter, now has a teenage daughter, and will then pass the car on to her. So I'm going to skip past that one. And this may challenge designers too, to think about different models. We've talked a lot about different ethical frameworks today. I kind of look back to a mental model that people might actually have for ethics, and one that seems to resonate with people who don't know a lot about ethics is this idea of a relationship and building and growing it gradually over time. So we'll find other ways to come together too and to build that empathy, whether it's a VR app like Lucid, which actually lets you feel literally, supposedly, what the other person feels, or these Twitter cocktails, which take all of the hashtags from an event, say on Twitter, and blends them together with their emotional content, and then you can actually drink the feelings of the event afterwards. That's what we'll look forward to in a few years. So we can see that we've expanded our signals, we've expanded the kinds of technologies that this can be used for, and maybe in 2030, we'll get to a world of compassion and care. So I guess I'm gonna leave us with this, that our emotional life is changing with technology. As we design technology, technology designs us. So we have these emotions that before COVID-19 were already emerging, and these emotional behaviors. That's changing. And new kinds of emotional behaviors are emerging, new kinds of feelings, new emotions that we've already had are becoming dominant in our context. And these will develop not just top down from what we create in our standards and our ethical guidelines and our design conventions, but also from the bottom up at the same time through contagion and people's mental models and how much they adopt this technology. And so this puts us in kind of a symbiotic relationship. And I think that what we have to look forward to, if we play this right, is to a new emotionally intelligent technology that augments our emotional experience rather than automates it, that embodies emotional intelligence in the experience itself, that develops a relationship with us gradually, which is more the mental model that I think people have of an ethical partnership, and thoughtfully scales empathy out beyond just ourselves and our inner circles. So I think I'll leave with this, that we need emotionally intelligent techies to develop emotionally intelligent tech. And I feel very hopeful. And I actually think that this shift that we're going through now, while it's difficult and overwhelming at times, is also may push us to a different place, not just with climate, not just with work, but also with our emotional technology as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pamela. That was an excellent, summative and forward-looking talk. I will continue, but if you have any questions, people who are in the audience, please enter them via the Q&A feature. We don't have any yet, or if you raise your hand, I will enable you to say your question yourself. Pamela, a mark of a good talk is that it leaves you with more questions coming out of it than you had going into it. I think you probably mentioned 24 different projects or products that I need to look into. So you are going to keep me busy with some work for the next couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's, that's sort of, there's so much interesting work going on, and there's so much that we can learn from, not just looking at patent searches, but also looking at what designers are trying to vividly imagine so we can try out these futures, right? Because it's one thing to talk about this in the abstract and where we want to go, but it's another thing to actually kind of, live it for a little bit and try it out that way. And I think that can help us move forward in a positive way.
Well, one of the wonderful things about technology nowadays is that the entry barriers are very low. We have the capability of printing things based on a computer model without having to go through a whole tool and die setup. We have software, machine learning in particular, that very flexibly adapts to a data set if you do the right kind of training of the data set, of course, as different people have discussed through the course of the day. The barriers to entry are low, which unleashes the possibility of being creative and of creating new products, services, technologies, toys, for that matter, that enrich life. And if it doesn't quite work the way that it should or deliver value, then, well, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's an excellent point. And that's a lot of the work I do, is trying to build off the tools that are already out there to kind of put something together really quickly and try it out and see what it is that, how people respond and what they think of it and what their comfort level is.